we'll close this segment on Alzheimer's and memory loss. Ask Nick Pietrzak, who is the long-term friend and colleague, worked with me on ER1, is now the Director of Strategic Initiatives for the MedStar Institute for Innovation. And he is going to talk about memory upgrade by design. How can we alter the physical environment to help patients with dementia?
Okay, well, thank you, Mark. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time today talking about how the physical environment can support memory. And what this really is an application of all the science that you've been hearing so far. The physical environment isn't going to do everything. It doesn't cover the love, it doesn't cover the technology that can support memory, but it is another component that we can put out there. So I'm not going to go through a full review of the science here. We know there's many types of memory. You notice I don't use the same categories of memory as everyone else has, because these are now very empirical and practical categories that we actually apply when we're out in the real world dealing with people. They don't care whether you're talking about is it long-term, short-term. They really know about their emotional things they understand. So we use a few different terminologies, but it's important to realize that there is plasticity involved in memory. These are constantly changing things, and they're redeveloping all the time. And even people with early dementia and Alzheimer's disease still demonstrate some plasticity. And there's modulators. We've talked about some of those already. There's brain exercises. We've shown some of those. The environment itself, nutrition, pharmacology, all of this can play into it, including things like sleep, which was mentioned. But the biggest single important thing in outcome of memory is what we call engagement. There's numerous studies for it. I have them backed up behind the presentation. I'm not going to go through it all, but the single most important thing for outcome is engagement. And that's engagement with family, with people, with things, with different kinds of activities. Without the engagement, deterioration occurs very rapidly in all forms of dementia. So this is the most important thing. And this has a lot to do with aging in place. If this is your model of aging in place is a wonderful thing. If your idea of aging in place is, hey, we have the technology, we can keep them at home and they're all alone, and we have them connected to all these great devices, and the nurses know when to come once a week, that's a failure of aging in place because there's no engagement. So there's a lot of roles for the physical environment. We can do memory support. We're going to show those kind of things. We can create engagements with the environment. And we can also have things that we call actual regenerative or healing design. I'll give a few examples of all of these. So I got involved in memory almost by accident, but it was primarily I just finished my career in emergency medicine in the Air Force, retired, and I didn't want to get a real job. So I took on a position as the executive director of the International Brain Injury Association. We had all kinds of great minds in there and everything else. And at the same time, I was building an assisted living facility. But what I learned as executive director of International Brain Injury Association is that the same concepts that occur with brain injury, with stroke and everything else, and the science behind it, could be applied to memory care and dementia. And so this is a little bit of thinking. This is about 15 years ago, and it was a little bit advanced at the time. But we came up with ideas by creating design that could incorporate all this. For one thing, when you go and rent a car, and you go look for that car in the parking lot after you parked it, do you find the car by looking at the license plate number of the car? You know, first thing you look for is the color. Okay? 15 years ago, if you went into any dementia unit in the United States, they had numbers on the doors of the room. And all the doors were the same color. All right? And that's how it was done. That wasn't helping much. So these things can be helped. Another thing is bring relevant things from their past life in there. This is not something just for dementia facilities. This is something even if you have someone in your health care environment, in a hospital room, or anywhere else, and you've brought them there bring some things that are recognizable to them into that room. So all of these things, you can see the kissing bridge that was mentioned earlier today. Those are kinds of things that are very embedded memories, and they're very emotional. But we want very distinct looking types of things, not things that look the same as everything else in the building. And then iconic memory. Now, that wasn't mentioned as one of the categories of memory, but iconic memory, the way we use it empirically, is something that creates an emotional response over and over and over again. For instance, the way a church looks to somebody might be that Gothic window and everything else. That person had multiple emotional experiences going back to that church over and over again over the years. That's a very deeply embedded memory, and that's an iconic type of memory. It's visual, emotional, and embedded over and over again. And it has cultural relevancy to it. And it's going to change from place to place. For example, there's the Gothic window that you can see there, and we built a little church type of thing, and everyone with dementia recognizes that as a church. We don't have to tell them it's a church. They go there when other people are going there for services, and they understand it. They would not recognize St. Basil's Cathedral in Russia, which is also a very iconic church, but it's not relevant to the culture of that individual person. And so then there's also the healing environment that we can bring in that brings textures, views, and colors. And we're learning more about these healing environments as time goes on, that there's actually science about certain colors, certain kinds of lights and everything else that do stimulate the brain. So we try to combine this all together and use music, sounds, even smells, and everything to create an environment. We came up with this kind of a concept this is about 15 years ago, using local things. This is in the state of Iowa, so you're going to see some icons there that might not be that relevant to us here on the East Coast, but they were very relevant there. We'll go through a few of them. It's just a dining area that looks like a cafeteria from the local things there. But very important there, might not be that important here, is the local football team. And we created tailgate type of experiences that everyone understood they were to go to the tailgate, including with a pickup truck from the era that was their teen and early college days and that type of thing, same kind of truck. And the brick and everything is the same as Niall Kinnick Stadium, which was the Iowa Hawkeye Stadium. And it created this environment for Saturday football games. And of course, we did do the parties there and the tailgating every Saturday. The nice thing about this was it also attracted families to come because our football experience was better than the one they had at home. And now we had the engagement with family again. I got a lot of grief over this, okay? It's in the main kind of atrium area there as part of all these other experiences. And I got a huge amount of grief about it. And why would you do this? Really showing no class at all. But the opening day, or our grand opening, we invited all kinds of people. A couple senators came. The national chairman of the Endowment of the Arts came. And they walked through there, and they were all kind of shrugging their shoulders looking at it. But we had a patient sitting there who was one of our more advanced Alzheimer's patients. And she leaned over to our head nurse, walked by, and she said, "I need to go to the bathroom." And the head nurse very politely says, "Well, okay, I'll take you there." And she goes, "I'm not stupid, I can see the moon." So I felt vindicated at that time. Okay, other thing, all of these things, again, are starting to come now. We're making experiences. And the experiences, we try to make them as real as possible. Dancing just in a blank room is not the same thing as dancing at a dancing hall for people who are from this era. So we try to make the dog place look like a dog place. We try to make the bathroom look like an outhouse. All these things, try to make them as real as possible. Barbershop, everyone can find the barbershop in our Alzheimer's facility. We don't have to give them directions there. The crafts barn, everybody knows what the barn is. Okay? But probably the most popular place is the soda shop and the ice cream dirt shop. And I can tell you, you can't see it very well, but behind the one gentleman's head is a jukebox. These are our patients. We did get permission for the photograph to be used from the families, just to let that know. But all of them know how to use the jukebox. I would suggest to you that if we put an iPad out there, no one's going to know how to use it. Okay? So it's culturally relevant and temporally relevant. And what is it temporally relevant to? Where do you think your best memories are from and your most deeply embedded one? We kind of brought it up before. It's where your emotions were the deepest. Probably ages 16 to 24, when you were developing love relationships, the most significant events of your life. And that happens to correlate right now with the people who are at this age group with the 1950s kind of soda shop and that type of stuff. This is the single most popular place for people to gather, and we don't have to take them there. Okay? It's very different what we did in Virginia from Iowa. You can see it's all about, this is in Virginia Beach, and it's all about the seashore and what's going on around that culture. And very different in Colorado. We create movie theaters that were the iconic movie theater at that particular town. And then come the engagement type of activities such as putting greens, pianos, art studios, gardens, and even we're starting to delve into experimenting with light to see how that works. So again, we try to create a dance type studio, similar picture to the one that was shown earlier actually, and bring in things like our smells and views. The picture of the mountains down below is actually a view from one of our facilities. And those are all important in that aspect. And experimentally, what's going on now at some of the great places like the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, they're looking at things like how do different hues of light affect memory and what's going on. So we're just getting into the tap of this now, and that can be built into the environment. So what's our call to action here? It really is that the environment is an important part of memory. We can use these iconic images. We can use all of these things to engage people, to make them interested in their environment, and to make them feel comfortable, because it does change their neurochemical balance when they feel or see the things that are familiar to them and actually work for them. That changes their neurochemistry. That's one thing that's very important. Now, you say, can't do all of this in the hospital, but we can certainly do some of it and bring some of those things in. Bring the music in that they like. Mark said something very important. The music he liked is the best music in the world. The best music in the world is that music that was connected to your emotional days of development. That's the best music in the world for everybody. And I think we can use that knowledge to give this to our patients as we're working with them, or to our family members at home when they're at home. There's more research that needs to be done. I think there's a lot that can be done in terms of looking at the environment and how it can affect memory. So it's apply these things to what we have now, and let's keep doing the research that can take us even further with it. So thank you very much for your time. Time for a question? We have time for one question. Yes? Yeah. So the question was, how many different decades can you accommodate in one facility? And the answer is not a lot. Okay, the facilities that we're looking at for the future are going to be very, very different from the ones that are there now. But as it turns out, because of the silver tsunami, it's a fairly described group that is coming into facilities at this time. And this is a big movement of people with Alzheimer's and dementia that is occurring right now and rapidly accelerating. They all are pretty much in that age group that we're, at least for the majority of them, we're looking at 70 and older at this point. And they have pretty much similar background experiences. But we're going to have to shift that in the next decade or two. It might be that more important than the ice cream soda shop, it'll be the upper deck of a 747 for the next generation. Who knows? Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mick.